Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast. And this week, we're reviewing The Disaster Artist.
A film that's received, oh, high marks from critics and viewers alike.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring two guys getting pickled and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And thank you to Robert Redmond from Facebook. Redmond. Hey, that's Redmond.
Or Mr. Redmond, as we knew him in high school. One of my film teachers in high school taught me film editing, or I don't know what the class was called, but one of the first people to teach me film. So thanks for submitting, Rob.
Well, sorry. I didn't know.
Well, sorry, I didn't know it was pronounced Redmond. But let us delay no further. Betwixt us for the second time on this podcast, Alex Berezansky.
What's going on, everybody?
The return.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. You might recognize that voice from the Moonlight episode, where we reviewed Moonlight, which would eventually go on to win the Oscar for Best Picture.
Yes.
And that's true. That was a very important episode for...
I thank you both for having me on for the better movies.
Yes.
Yeah, we typically try to have guests on once a year, and Alex is like, "Hey man, thanks for having me on for like not Daddy's Home 2." And we're like, "Yeah, no, you happen to get in at like the Oscar season." Yeah.
I'll probably do the same thing and request the next one in advance if I see something like, "Yeah, I'm gonna probably want to talk about this."
Yeah, no, there's actually history to this. I literally, it had to be like 8 months ago, or
it was like at least half a year ago.
Yeah.
I hit you up on Facebook, and I was like, I saw Disaster Artist is coming out in December. I want to put in a request now.
Yeah, I don't even think we saw the first trailer yet.
The first trailer had just come out.
Okay, then the first trailer just came out, and Alex is like, I want to be on there for this. And then I didn't remember until like days ago, and I was like, Mike, go ask Alex if he wants to be on Disaster Artist. And he's here now. So the rest is history that we're about to make.
Maybe now Disaster Artist will win in a surprise upset at the Oscars for Best Picture.
Is it not? It's nominated for Best in the Golden Globes.
At the Golden Globes, for comedy.
Yeah, Best Comedy, yeah.
It could be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. I'd be a little surprised, based on I do my whole like.
It'll probably get nominated for something.
I think
James Franco will probably
possibly
be nominated.
Dave Franco actually surprised me in this movie. I thought he was pretty good.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah, he doesn't agree with me. He does not agree with me. Yeah.
We'll get into it.
I could tell as soon as I started saying that, just by the look in your eyes, like, nope.
Yeah, no, I wasn't happy. My eyes go from like happy to like, yeah, Alex, I guess we'll talk about that later, huh?
Out. Get out now.
Leave.
Dave Franco's performance.
Get the fuck out of here. It's about to get rough tonight. Last episode, fight night. If it's your
can't hold anything back now.
If it's the last episode and it's your first night, you gotta fight. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. And also Alex was in our film Less Than 3. Which we've already. And
they just gave me
finally
this fucking DVD.
We got posters.
The posters.
If anyone listening to this podcast wants posters, we've got them.
Yeah. He's insisting I take 5 home with me. I'm gonna throw them out.
I've got 95 more upstairs.
Guys, contact us if you would like a Less Than 3 poster.
We should do another contest just to give the posters away.
But yeah, let's talk about these beers.
What'd you buy for us, Joe?
Okay, so again, because we're in the plus 100 episode territory, I got us Carta Blanca, which is from the international section of my beer store.
You guys are really running out of beers.
Product of Mexico.
It's This is no longer a beer. It's a cerveza.
What does Carta Blanca mean? What does carte blanche mean? That's a phrase, right?
I took like...
We're smart people, right?
I took like Spanish 5 in high school and I couldn't...
Something white.
Well, the non-Spanish version of it means something. Carte blanche. We're learning in real time. Complete freedom to act as one wishes or thinks best. So that's actually a good name for a beer.
Yes, yeah.
If that's what that means. And Carta Blanca.
This is really just okay. It's not a great beer.
I haven't actually opened mine up yet. I'm looking up the translation. Let's pop this bad boy. White card, it means in Spanish. Almost as good as the freedom to act as one pleases. That is about as bland as beer gets.
It is. It's really like Mexican.
It's just a white card that you can write whatever you want onto.
Mexico really only just makes like really great like Corona or Modelo or I don't know,
Dos Equis.
Dos Equis.
This is actually I will say this is, I mean, it feels weak in comparison to like the PBR we're drinking on the side or like the IPAs and porters that we've been drinking throughout the night. This is actually a pretty decent light beer once you kind of like wash those other beers off your palate.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's nothing that's like offensive about the taste at all.
Right, because I know exactly what you're talking about because
this is a great like I just mowed the lawn and I just want to drink something refreshing.
Because I had a big gulp of PBR before I had this, and then I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But now that I'm drinking it kind of back to back, I'm like, oh, okay.
It's pretty good for a light beer.
Yeah.
Hey, sponsor us, Carta Blanca. White card.
Hola, Carta Blanca.
Hola, dinero. Por favor.
Man, somebody's Spanish is coming.
Hello, money, please.
See. Man. But let's jump into the Disaster Artist. The IMDb description is: when Greg Sestero, an aspiring film actor, meets the weird and mysterious Tommy Wiseau in an acting class, they form a unique friendship and travel to Hollywood to make their dreams come true. Sounds like a dream.
Yeah.
Let me run through some mic notes real quick.
Go for it.
The film is based on Greg Sestero and Tom Bisel's nonfiction book of the same name and chronicles the making of Tommy Wiseau's 2003 cult film The Room, widely considered one of the worst movies ever made. The film was directed by James Franco, who has a longer and lengthier directing history than I was aware of.
It's all awful. It's all like stuff nobody's heard of either.
I thought this was his debut.
I thought it. I knew he had done like college films. I didn't realize they were like actually put out and available and like credited on his pages.
Why does he keep them on his IMDb is the question, yeah.
He's previously directed The Ape in 2005, which is a feature-length film about a man dealing with a foul-mouthed Hawaiian shirt-wearing gorilla as a roommate that I now need to find and watch. Just go look up The Ape on IMDb or Wikipedia and just look at the poster for this movie. Like it's literally like it says, a Hawaiian shirt-wearing gorilla in the background and James Franco just like, oh no, what a roommate. What did I get myself into?
Oh no.
That sounds interesting enough.
So I need to watch that. He directed Fool's Gold, Good Time Max, The Feast of Stephen, The Broken Tower, Sal, My Own Private River, which was a documentary, Interior Leather Bar, As I Lay Dying, Child of God, The Sound and the Fury, Indubious Battle, and The Institute, with a ton more that he's got in his pipeline for the upcoming years.
I do not think I've heard of any of those.
A ton of these were films that he did at NYU, but I guess they also were able to be released after that. They were like his student films or his MFA project and stuff like that.
He loves that Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah.
He loves like it, and we'll get into that about this. Is I think he
He wants to be a filmmaker, and he envisions himself being this filmmaker of great American novels, like bringing them to the screen. And I think this movie proves that this is what he needs to stick to, and what it's probably good at is comedy that he knows best with friends that he works well with.
Well, I mean, it's also like, I don't think he saw The Room and was like, that's a great film. I think he had to read some sort of novel that he was like,
that's your point.
like it's definitely not written by Greg Sestero. Greg Sestero provides the content, but it's the great
Tom Bisel,
journalist of Tom Bisel, who writes this book very obviously in the book. And I mean, I'll talk about the book when we get out of the notes, but yeah. Again, I just think it's another like kind of great work of nonfiction, I guess. And James Franco was like, I need to make this into a movie.
Apparently he loves The Room, is what I heard him say. He genuinely loves the movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a great Hollywood story, and I think he's very attracted to that too. Because
I feel like James is pretty attracted to Tommy in general, just like kind of like relates to him in that way.
Oh no, definitely, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, James has been in like a James Dean movie where he plays James Dean, kind of like he loves these kind of stories, kind of.
There's definitely a little bit of themselves that's been inserted into this movie. But obviously James Franco is an actor before he was a director, and meanwhile being a director. Most notably, he was in 127 Hours, for which he was nominated for an Oscar.
That's my favorite James Franco right there.
127 Hours. Spring Breakers, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, and Rise of the Planet of the Apes, just to name a few of his bigger ones. He's got a pretty extensive filmography. Just between his directing and his acting, like, the dude loves film. And it's just, that's all he really does is make movies in some capacity.
What's your favorite like James Franco role?
Pineapple Express is up there too, I must say.
I have to say my favorite, like, I think the peak of James Franco characters is Freaks and Geeks. Like, that character is really my favorite, and I think you get to see his range too. Like, I think one of maybe my favorite moments in TV and film is when Lindsay Weir, what's that one episode where he's trying to kind of like either cheat off of her or like
she rats him out for cheating, and then he has to prove that he knows the test. So he's taking the test in front of everybody in the counselor's room, the guy with the bald mullet head.
And he tells her this sort of sob story, and she falls for it, and then he has to take this test in front of her parents and his teacher and the guidance counselor and the principal or whatever, and he starts telling them his sob story, where he's like, I was never fucking given a chance, kind of. And then she starts obnoxiously laughing, and he has like this fucking sneer on his face.
Cool.
That I've never seen, and it's such like a great moment of acting, and it's really wonderful. And again, in that series, he really just plays this guy, man. Like, even in that opening credits, like, he's not really attractive. He's got like this weird, wild smile of just kind of, I'm fucking high and I don't fucking care. Like,
that's like all of their greatest roles. Like, even
Seth Rogen,
definitely
Jason Segel has like some of his best work in
Linda
there.
Cardellini, her best role by far, for sure.
Oh yeah, it was. It's so weird that like a teenage sitcom kind of has this really, or just like a cable show that's competing against like Malcolm in the Middle. I think
it's also funny that Bryan Cranston is in this referencing Malcolm in the Middle when that was the show that took them off the air,
or that James Franco starred alongside of Bryan Cranston in like him, whatever the fuck that movie was called. Who him?
I had to Google that after I watched the movie, because I never read the book like you. I wanted to know if that was true, that Greg ran into Bryan Cranston.
Oh no, yeah, he didn't. Yeah, there's a lot of
He didn't, or
no. This is so much of this is fabricated again, just because. Again, this. I mean, I'll get into it.
I think Tommy said it was pretty accurate.
The audiobook is, it's 12 hours, and you got to compress this into an hour and a half movie. You gotta, I don't know. Mm-hmm. You gotta do what you gotta do.
It was The Disaster Artist was written by Scott Newsteader. I don't know if anyone has a better handle on that pronunciation.
I don't.
I'm not gonna try.
Newsteader. And Michael H. Weber. They're kind of a writing duo. They've previously worked on 500 Days of Summer, The Pink Panther 2, The Spectacular Now, The Fault in Our Stars, and Paper Towns. Which is a very weird... 500 Days of Summer, pretty good screenplay, and then The Pink Panther 2, and then a bunch of John Green adaptations after that.
Yeah.
And then this. The movie's doing pretty well with award season so far in the early runnings. It's been nominated for 4 Critics' Choice Movie Awards for Best Actor in a Comedy, Best Comedy, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And for 2 Golden Globes for Best Actor, Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy. If it's not obvious, the Best Actor ones are all for James Franco. And Best Male Lead at the Independent Spirit Awards, again, James Franco. And then again, James Franco at the Screen Actors Guild Awards for Outstanding Performance by a Male Actor in a Leading Role. And probably and possibly more by the time this episode actually comes out. He'll have been nominated for, because we're really getting into the throes of awards season now.
I think, he's on kind of the border of Oscar predictions. He's kind of in that number 5 slot for Oscar predictions of whether he'll be nominated. I think he'll make it. I think he'll be nominated for an Oscar for this film.
I think people are going to want to give this film some kind of recognition, and I don't think it's going to be up for Best Picture, so I think it's going to come from...
Oh, definitely not.
He's been nominated by the Oscars in the past, so he's got a little bit of history with them, so they'll want to give him something.
It'll get nominated for something, at least even a couple things, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still think one of my... I'll get into my history with this whole movie or whatever, but I still think James Franco should have been nominated for his performance as
Riff-Raff
in Spring Breakers. That's such a fantastic performance. Spring Breakers, I love Harmony Korine. He's such a great director, and anything he's involved with is fantastic. Spring Breakers was a fucking flaming pile of garbage, but James Franco is such a magnetic force in that movie, and he is Riff Raff.
Yeah.
I don't know how long he spent with Riff Raff or whatever, but he's so just there, and he's doing it. And
didn't Riff Raff himself sue because of that?
Yeah, Riff Raff was this is my fucking likeness, man. Fucking, you can't profit off of this. He's I love Harmony and I love James. He's but I've got to get money from this, man. This is my whole deal. But yeah, off mic we were just talking about. Again, I talked to Alex 6-8 months ago, and we were talking about this movie, and I had read the book. I don't know if I ever finished it. I borrowed it from a friend from high school, and I don't know if I ever finished it just because there's so much just long, detailed accounts about how fucking much of a sociopath Tommy is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I signed up for, the free 30-day trial of Audible. I'm sure you can also get this on some sort of BitTorrent, which I download a lot of my audiobooks on. Don't come for me. But the audiobook is so it gets boring at parts, but it's so pleasant, and I flew through it. Anytime I was on a run, or I was in my car, or I'm just I have downtime and I'm just doing dumb shit on my computer, I would listen to it. And And Greg Sestero this is obviously not written by Greg Sestero. This is, it's so intelligently written. It has to be by, it's not by the model, like kind of simpleton Greg Sestero. It's definitely by the Tom Bisel or whatever, the world-renowned journalist. But it's such a brilliantly written, and Greg Sestero, I know I just discounted him. He reads the whole thing, and he's fucking brilliant. His performance reading this audiobook is almost better than this movie, I would say. It more encapsulates, like, what The Room is than this movie does. I don't want to discount this movie too much, but he does a spot-on impression of Tommy. And again, we'll talk about this more in the actual review. I don't know whether James Franco was doing more of... I would rather him do more of a likeness, more like acting, rather than an impression of Tommy, which I think is important. But Sestero does a spot-on impression. Like, it's like Tommy's talking. Mm-hmm. He does like a really great... again, it's a 12-hour-long saga, really. And his mom is a completely different character. His agent is a completely different character. And he does impressions of all of them. And it's really, really, really well done.
That's surprising. It's because his voice is kind of boring in like interviews. And
shit. No, he's a fantastic voice actor. Yeah, and I really don't know where that comes from. I mean, again, if maybe you've spent a decade with Tommy, you can pick up the voice. And again, maybe if your profession is like, I'm an actor, you kind of have to know how to...
Well, the only thing I've seen him act in, obviously, is The Room, and it's very difficult for an actor to act out bad writing.
Right. And, I don't know, it's so hard to talk about this movie. It's really hard to... let's jump into the movie from here. But, so, we talked about this, in our Star Wars episode or whatever that's come out previously. And it's hard to if something's come out in a film fest or something, like this premiered at South by Southwest, and people went fucking apeshit for it.
Mm-hmm. Standing ovation.
People were talking about this winning Best Picture, which is like crazy. But I was kind of like, okay, like, I'm fucking on board. Like, me and Alex were like, I don't know, man. This might have what it takes, kind of. This might be like the perfect movie.
It is about Hollywood, and Hollywood loves to award movies that are about Hollywood.
So we saw La La Land as a almost a Best Picture winner.
If it weren't for that damn meddling Moonlight.
I turned off the Oscars as soon as I saw La La Land.
I
turned it off. I found out like an hour later that Moonlight...
We woke up our neighbors.
We fucking lost our fucking minds over that.
It was like a Super Bowl reaction. Mm-hmm. We were like, oh my God!
But yeah, and then we had the teaser trailer come out, and then I expressed this to both of you. I was like...
You did. Yeah, you were skeptical.
I'm not impressed with this. Like, this is just kind of a Tommy Wiseau impression. And then we saw a trailer come out. We probably saw another trailer come out that was like a little more cut. And I was like, kind of like, okay, maybe. And then I was taking like Instagram story like screenshots of like, oh, I finished the audiobook and I rewatched The Room, and I was like, okay, I'm fucking ready for this movie. Like, this is gonna be really great. What about you? Did you guys? How did you prepare for, or just what is your history with The Room? Because that was also, I'll talk about that later. Yeah, go on. Yeah,
I was worried about the James Franco's Tommy voice too, because like you said, it did sound like he was doing an impression.
Right.
But it grew on me. It did grow on me, and it's hard with a guy like Tommy Wiseau because his voice is so fucking unique. Like, you don't hear anyone else that sounds like that. So how do you
really pin the accent?
Be a character like that without it kind of sounding a little like an impersonation? But
right.
My history of The Room is it was about 2011, and my buddy John Colucci gave me a DVD. I had no clue what it was, and he wouldn't tell me. He's like, just watch it. And so I was dorming at William Patterson at the time, and I brought it back, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I just left it on the table, and my roommate Robin picked it up, and he smiled, and he said, "Where did you get this?" And I told him, and he was like, "We're watching this as a group. We're getting everyone together, and we're going to watch this." And that was my introduction. And I'm glad, because you do have to watch a movie like that in a group.
No,
I can't imagine seeing that for the first time by yourself. It would be very difficult to get through.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. I think I watched it the first time, and I was under the influence of something.
That helps too.
Yeah, no, it was definitely. I was by myself, but I was like kind of like.
Okay.
I was high, yeah. But I think it was introduced to. Sorry for cutting off Mike, but it was introduced to us at a time where we were in college, and alt comedy wasn't so mainstream yet, but Tim and Eric was wildly influential in our lives. I mean, Tommy Wiseau directs an episode of Tim and Eric, and I think this is around the time when Adult Swim was just playing The Room like every few weeks.
They would actually show the movie on Adult Swim?
They would show the entire movie in its entirety. I definitely saw it at home once. Like I was watching it or whatever, just because I knew it was on. Because besides that, I just watched like a ripped file of it, because we had a roommate, Eric, who will eventually join us, but he was kind of he showed us like Cannibal Holocaust and like Ichi the Killer and like The Room and just all of these movies kind of like floating around this like weird kind of, movies that everyone's seen by now,
right.
But like you can't, But yeah,
just outside like the popular realm.
I thought Room was a joke at first. The first time I watched it, and I went online, I looked up Tommy Wiseau immediately. I thought he was just doing some Sacha Baron Cohen shit, and he just wasn't going to break character, and I thought it was genius. It took me a while before I realized that this guy's actually very serious.
I actually only just recently, like the night before I saw Disaster Artist, watched The Room in full. I had seen like all of the famous scenes in like clips I had watched on like YouTube, but I hadn't like sat down and made the commitment to watch it until just before.
You went all this time without seeing The Room.
I mean, I knew every reference anyone made to The Room because I had seen all like the famous clips, but I hadn't watched them in sequence. I didn't know the context of all these clips. Not that the context really matters when you watch.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
I have to say that watching The Room all the way through for the first time, I underestimated how bad it actually is.
How boring it is.
Oh, I was entertained.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not how they wanted me to be entertained.
So you probably already knew all the best parts.
Yeah.
Or seen like the clips.
Yeah, like
from,
I knew, like You're Tearing Me Apart, Lisa, and Oh Hi Mark, and I did not hit her.
Doggy.
I swear. Oh Hi Doggy.
Breast cancer.
Good doggy.
But yeah, I underestimated how bad the movie actually is, which was great to watch for the first time. But I feel like it might have hurt my enjoyment of the Disaster Artist to watch The Room right before. I watched on Wednesday night. I watched The Room, and then on Thursday night we went to see Disaster Artist. And I feel like there's scenes in the Disaster Artist that like having The Room so fresh in my mind, I was like, oh, that's not how it was in The Room. Like you guys are trying to recreate something that didn't actually happen in The Room, or it would show me like, oh, these performances. Like James Franco's I Forgive, like you said, because it seems like a bad impression at first, but he does such great acting with it that it falls into the type of acting that I like, where it's not so focused on how exactly did he say everything or how exactly did his eye look during this scene. It's more about the emotions. But with some of the other actors where they don't get the opportunity to really portray the emotions and they don't really nail the performances, like Josh Hutcherson really cannot capture how good or how strange Denny's character is in The Room.
And he was one of the better ones too
Yeah.
in the movie. Like after I saw this movie, I was just kind of like, James Franco wanted to make this movie so he could play Tommy Wiseau. Like I think that's literally, and the biggest problem with this film is that I think James Franco was in charge of this film. Like, I think maybe he took like the wrong message away from Spring Breakers and whatever went wrong with that, where he gave a fantastic riff-raff performance and then the movie turned out like not great. But like when he directed this film, I was just kind of like, oh, like no, like James Franco should have been like concentrated on just like, I'm Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah.
And somebody else just should have taken the direction of this movie a different way.
It's very difficult to do that when you're acting and directing something.
Yes, entirely. Okay. I mean, I don't think James Franco's brother should have played Greg Sestero. I thought that was the weakest performance in this film.
The weakest?
Really? Maybe
I think it's Dave Franco's strongest performance he's ever given.
Right. Yeah,
but I do agree that it's one of the weaker ones in the film.
I think Dave Franco's a really great like.
It's hard. It's also hard to fault like James Franco for putting his brother in a movie where all of his friends are already in it. Like everyone in this did not earn it on their laurels. They earned it on being the people that James Franco hangs out with.
I gotta say, Seth Rogen fit in perfectly.
Yeah, he was fine.
Yeah, Seth Rogen gives the best performance besides James Franco in this movie.
I was reading an interesting note that that actor, or not the actor, the line script supervisor, the character that Seth Rogen is playing, was like kept reaching out to Seth Rogen, being like, "Do you want to like meet up and like see what I'm actually like and like talk to me?" And Seth Rogen was like, "Nope." I guess he had an idea of how he wanted to play the character right off the bat, and he didn't want to influence at all with how this guy actually was.
It's also funny because in the actual production of this movie, Sandy is just like a fourth of the like. They go through like 4 different like this is just like a fourth of what happens. Like Tommy fires 4 different cinematographers. He fires 4 different like script supervisors. It gets like out of control. Where like the interns are like end up like filming the last of the film. Like it just gets, it's even like, that's the thing, is like a movie can't be made about this because this experience is too ridiculous kind of. They
condense a lot. Like even like the limited amount that I know about the creation of The Room is that like the script took like 3 years to write, but in the movie it's like a 2-minute montage of like, I'm writing and maybe he's a vampire, and like it's a funny sequence, but like they're really just like, well, now Dave Franco has a beard and it's been 3 years, but they don't really, it doesn't come across to us that it's been 3 years. It's like, oh, maybe it was like a couple months, when in reality it was 3 years that it took him to write that screenplay.
Yeah.
And that's like a lot of time for like Dave Franco to not be getting roles, or Greg Sestero rather, to not be getting roles. And
well, did he? Does the book say anything about that?
He does, because
he does get roles, or
yes. So he's in like a lot of popular TV shows, and he even does a feature-length movie called like The Puppet Master or something, which obviously doesn't do well in America or whatever, but he is brought on by a very successful like agent. Like that's true. When he gets like that agency or whatever, like he works very, very hard to get that. And I mean, he's there with like River Phoenix and like everybody who's making it during that time, kind of, you know? Like Mark Hamill, River Phoenix, like everybody like is there kind of, and he's like he's, you know, he gets this feature-length movie and they're not totally impressed, and then he's not really getting work. And that's the thing, is during this movie there's not like a great amount of like there's not like a great reason or just inspiration or what is the word that I'm trying to think of? Motivation. For Greg to like.
Well, in the movie there is. In the real story, you're saying there's not.
No. In the movie, what is the motivation for him to help Tommy make this movie besides we're best friends? Like, like
because he hasn't in the movie he hasn't had his break yet.
That's very true.
Because that's why they have the whole plot line of like, oh, I run into Bryan Cranston, he offers me a part and I jump on it. Like that he hasn't had his break yet. Mm-hmm. He hasn't been getting roles, even though he's been accepted by this talent agency. Mm-hmm. Like that's what he's complaining about in that scene is like, I have this talent agency, but they're not getting me any roles. Like I just wish I could create my own role. I write my own movie, and that's what makes Tommy go write the movie is like, right. Yeah, we could create our own movie. That's why he agrees to it. In the movie, it makes sense. That may not be how it actually went down, but in the screenplay, I think it makes sense.
I try to. I mean, I'll get back to this several times, but I tried to watch this movie without, like, just completely clearing my mind of like, I've never watched The Room, I've never read The Disaster Artist, but I thought there was really no motivation for Greg to help Tommy make this movie besides like. I don't know, maybe besides Greg's character comes across as kind of this simpleton character who's just kind of...
I think that is part of it.
But yeah, and it becomes like this kind of like dumb buddy comedy between him and Tommy. And it's just kind of like, let's like make this movie, and then all of a sudden halfway through making this movie, Tommy kind of becomes this like raging asshole where he's kind of like, hey, fucking like put some makeup like on this, and it kind of wants the best of these both worlds of kind of like the dumb like James Franco like buddy comedy and like reality of where Tommy like essentially held Greg hostage financially to make this movie with him. I thought the friendship seemed very genuine, though. It did, and I think in real life it wasn't. But I'm just trying to make sense of in this universe of this movie, did it make sense?
Okay, well, it seemed
him
like
making the movie with Tommy.
In the movie,
yes, I think it does.
It seemed like Greg was like really like even with like the first scene when he was just like, you see Greg, he's like all insecure and shit, and then Tommy just gets up and he does that ridiculous whatever the fuck that was. I fucking
love the setup of this movie from
good.
That first scene because that's such a great contrast between the two characters, and they show it so well. Like showing Greg on stage, like not really able to step outside of himself, not really able to act, outside of himself. He's just kind of timid and quiet and reserved. And then, if you had to write this movie, it may not be accurate, but if you had to write this movie about why would Greg Sestero agree to do this movie with Tommy, it's because he sees something in Tommy that he wants to emulate.
There has to be at least some form of truth to it.
Yeah, some ability of Tommy to get outside of himself, to sort of be fearless. Like Tommy is afraid of like negative reactions, but he doesn't really perceive negative reactions as they're happening.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his thing, is that like he can go out there and sort of just have his blinders up about like, I'll do this Stella scene and everyone will think it's amazing if I'm just writhing around on the floor and humping my hand as I scream
to this
Stella.
day, I actually kind of wonder if Tommy in real life realizes how much of the joke is on him.
Yeah. I mean, that's the mystery.
Not that I think it really is. I do think there's a lot of fans who do genuinely appreciate this movie, but...
Well, I think we see that a lot in the final scene.
Which also wasn't accurate.
Which is 10 years squashed into one screening, kind of, But I forget what I was going to say. But the...
We were talking about, does it make sense for Greg to, in this universe of this movie, forgetting The Disaster Artist, or the book, forgetting The Room, does it make sense for Greg in this universe of this movie to do the movie with Tommy?
Me, it did.
And I think it does, because I think if you take he has this little bit of admiration for him that gets him in the door with Tommy. They do develop sort of a friendship. They are bonding over things. They're watching the James Dean movies, and they have this shared dream of going to Hollywood. And it doesn't seem like Greg has that many other friends. He's a little bit lonely in that regard, in this universe at least.
Also, I mean, in this movie, he doesn't seem like the type of guy to really criticize anyone. Or the type who would like give harsh criticism on someone's
he's
script.
Insecure about himself as well.
But
and then I think the biggest thing for me is that he's very grateful for the fact that Tommy brings him out to LA and has his place and lets him crash there. And I think that's the biggest reason, because I think he does read the script. I think Dave Franco does give a decent performance in that, like, we can see he's reading this and being like, this is not good, but I'm going to try my best to be like, this is okay, dude. Like, sure, we'll do this movie. And I think it's more out of just gratitude to Tommy for bringing him out there, because he doesn't move in with his girlfriend until like they're already making The Room at that point, and he's already deep in it. So I think he's more just, he's grateful to Tommy for bringing him out there. A little bit of admiration for Tommy for having this kind of like ability to step outside of himself. And again, he's got nothing else really going on at that time. So like, why not make this movie that this guy can afford to make? Like he would probably take in any role at that point. So why not the movie that he sort of has a little bit of influence on?
Yeah. And I don't know. It never totally added up.
Also, when he agreed, it was just a bad screenplay. It wasn't he wasn't envisioning all the horrible shit that was going to go down.
Right. And it was just kind of, there's a difference between like, and again, that's not really, and that's a part like where he like kind of refuses in the book. He's like, I'm not gonna fucking do that, Tommy. Like when like reading out loud, like in the restaurant or whatever, and like, you know, saying like the lines out loud, like in a restaurant, like, you know, kind of both of them embarrassing themselves.
That scene
like,
was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, but like that doesn't happen in the scene, but I like that in this movie. But it's just, it's hard. It was hard for me to sympathize with Greg when he was like, Tommy, chill out. Like when he's kind of abusing the cast during the sex scene, when I've just kind of been like, dude, you've just been a guy along for the ride like this whole time. You've just kind of been this simpleton who's like agreed to go along with everything. Like it was just kind of this dumb buddy comedy where like the audition scenes were just, like really uncomfortable for me, because it felt like them, like the both of them, like it was a really weird like funny montage where they were making like a bunch of women do stuff, where in like reality I think that scene was like Tommy doesn't know better and he's making women do like very weird stuff. He'd be like, okay, pretend, like these are like literally lines from the book, he'd be like, okay, pretend your mom just found out you're a lesbian, or just okay, pretend your sister just died, how you act, kind of. And like just telling like 200 different women like these like really bizarre like just circumstances, and Greg being like, Tommy, this is not okay. But like in this montage of kind of like, okay, pretend you're eating ice cream, and she's like, oh, like, are you sure this isn't a porno? And Greg's like they're both kind of giggling. I was like,
that was a little weird.
You can't have this both ways, where you do that scene and then you do the scene where Greg's uncomfortable with the sex scene. You can't fucking do that to women in one scene, and you can't fucking like, you know. I was I was just like, this is it, like he wants like, there's two different movies. There's three different movies. There's one movie that I expected it to be behind the scenes of The Room. It's shot like the weird documentary camera work that it's like this, and it just does behind the scenes of The Room. I'm okay with that movie. There's one movie where it's just buddy comedy Room. And it's the first half of this movie before Greg freaks out, before Tommy turns into a dickhead and he's mistreating women, kind of. And that's an okay movie. And there's one movie where maybe Tommy's in real life is dead, and like they're able to make this very truthful movie of what like a crazy manipulative fucking sociopath Tommy actually is in real life. And like that is the vision that creates what The Room became. The Room is one of the most like misogynistic films, like just out of pure just I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really completely understand American culture, kind of like these are three different movies, and James Franco makes like a collage of these three, and that you can't do that. You can't do that.
I want to bring up what you said about Tommy being a sociopath, because that was the one thing that was very unexpected when I went into this movie, because like I said, I haven't read the book.
Right. Yeah.
I never knew that Tommy behaved like that at all. I was expecting to go into this and just see a straight up empathetic portrayal of Tommy and just a man with big dreams, and I was going to go in there and feel for him. He really came off like a total covert narcissist who's just completely wrapped up in himself. And I didn't expect that at all. I never heard anything like that. So I mean.
And you do get some of that from this film because, I mean, what are the motivations in this film?
I want to be famous.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. Greg Sestero is all-American boy. He's getting, he gets representation, and he can't do that without Tommy's, his real estate or his financial position. And Tommy doesn't really have the confidence to go into LA, or Tommy's just obsessed with his all-American, Greg Sestero's all-American look. And so there's not really even a friendship in this movie. They're just kind of these people sucking off of each other's.
Well, that's how a lot of sociopaths work in real life too. That when you're friends early on, they'll do something really, really nice for you because they want to be able to use that against you later on.
Right. They get a lot into the book of just kind of like, what's the psychology of Tommy? Like, Tommy is only taking you on because like he can gain something from you, or he's living something out through you. And again, it's presented as this dumb buddy comedy that doesn't really work.
See, I don't totally agree with that interpretation of it. Like, I think there's a friendship of sorts going on, but it is disjointed, and I don't think it's just this carefree, like, buddy comedy.
Okay.
I think there are certain nuances to Dave Franco's performance that let us in on, like, I get more of the feeling that Dave Franco's using Tommy in this movie. Or, sorry, Greg Sestero is using Tommy in this movie from Dave Franco's performance.
Okay.
Like, I think there's times where he lets us in on, like, yeah, Tommy, like I'm uncomfortable with what's happening right now, but I don't know how to say no to you.
Right.
Like, you know? And like there's times where, he is genuinely excited, like, yeah, because he sees LA and he sees the bright lights rather than the reality of living with Tommy Wiseau. But I think there's other scenes, like the scene where there's times where he defends Tommy, but it's more just out of like politeness. Like when he has the scene with with Gerard Carmichael, in the movie, he's like his actor friend, the black guy, the dinner scene, and he's talking about, oh, you're with that weird like dude, like he makes like Hollywood's like pussy shrivel up and stuff like that,
right, yeah.
And like Greg is like sort of trying to defend Tommy in that scene, and he's like, oh, like he's not that bad, he's a little weird, but he can't like fully come to his defense. Like I think it's a more nuanced performance than that, and I think it's not fully like, oh, we're just these like happy-go-lucky dumb people that are using each other in Hollywood. Like, I think it's more about Greg wanting something and being willing to go to certain lengths to reach that. And the movie is more about like, at a certain point, he reaches his breaking point of like, okay, like I can't put up with Tommy to this degree for, at the expense of my career, because he's clearly ruining his career with the whole not letting him shave or making him shave for the Bryan Cranston Malcolm in the Middle scene, and there's just a whole lot where I don't think it's really like a buddy comedy thing in the first half. I didn't perceive it that way at all. There's comedy in it, but I don't think it's like.
I wish
I saw more of a little bit of empathy that he's feeling for Tommy, because I think he is sort of a sympathetic character. And he admires a lot about him, but I don't think there's like a genuine friendship connection actually going on there. I think Greg is just seeing like Hollywood. Here's my way to Hollywood.
And it's not that the audiobook or regular book is all gloom and doom. There's a genuine friendship at some point, because Greg's mom is a real fucking bitch, and I don't know why. Like, maybe they wanted to have that actress as his mom, and maybe she was a friend, but this book is so much more about immigrants and the perception of the American dream is so much of what I took, because she's a Russian immigrant who gives
Greg's mom?
Yes, yeah. She's just straight Russian. And so she's like, we fucking brought you here. You can't be serious that you want to be an actor. Like, we fucking gave up so much to come here. You can't be serious that you want to be an actor, kind of. And again, Greg kind of gets his first acting job because he can do some sort of like Russian accent. And when Greg brings out his Russian accent in front of Tommy, who is obviously has some sort of Russian descent, Tommy always gets very like defensive, like, oh, what are you doing that stuff for? We are all American boys, like, you know, like kind of thing. And it's this very like complicated 3-player, like Greg's mom, Greg, and Tommy, like 3 degrees of immigrants in America who are trying to live the American dream and 3 different perceptions of the American dream. And like why they turn that into like this weird, just purely like American kind of like, I don't know. It was weird. I wish, and again, like Greg's mom is fucking like harsh on him, and that's where he finds this level ground with Tommy, kind of like, oh, there's this one person who believes in me, kind of. And like I like that in the movie because that does kind of show in the movie. Like there's a peep of that, like where nobody else believes in me except for you, Tommy, and you can take me there, you know, and you have the financial means and, you know, the real estate memes to take me there.
Love those real estate memes. Have you refinanced lately? Having not read the book The Disaster Artist, I did like his mom in this movie. I thought
it's also important that movies should stand on their own.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what the book says or whatever. That's very important. It doesn't matter what the Room movie is about. This movie should stand on its own. I think that's also problematic.
See, because I think the scene with his mom in this movie, because there's a lot of this movie that is sort of empathetic to Tommy. Mm-hmm. And I think the scene with his mom in this movie sort of grounds us, it pulls us back to reality, because we have a little bit of Greg being like, he's my ticket to Hollywood. Like, he's this guy who sort of is what I want to be on stage and on screen. And he's kind of taken with Tommy in that way. And the Megan Mullally as Greg's mom is sort of able to pull us back and be like, no, yeah, he's creepy. Like, he's really creepy. And he's saying some things that are almost like pedophilic. And like, they play it to comedic effect, which is great, that I think it works both ways, where we're laughing at it, but I am also being like, yeah, there's a darker side to Tommy. Like, there's something going on there in that mystery. There's something fucked up about the way that he won't tell us how old he is or where he's from or like what his true motivations about anything are. And I thought that was to great effect in this movie to have that in there.
Absolutely.
And they definitely ramp up the homo.
I thought
I
didn't read anything about that, but I thought I might be the only one noticing that. But it really did seem like they had a couple moments in there where they were hinting at that.
They fucking ramp it up in this movie compared to like what the book says. Kind of like, I think there's one scene where the book is like, Greg's mom, even as a Russian immigrant, is like, does this man want to have sex with you, kind of? And Tommy's like fucking furious. He's like, how dare you think that of me, kind of. But like, this movie, I feel like it's used as more of a comedic point of just kind of like, there's a few different scenes where it's kind of like, are they gay though? Like you know, like it's just it's kind of like there's a lot of like weird comedic, like it's kind of like it's kind of like the whole like Franco camp is like, as soon as I came out of this movie, somebody who has like Savory was like, what do you think of this movie? Who's never heard of The Room, or whatever, and I've just kind of been like slowly filling her in on it. And she was like, what did you think? And I just like blurted out without even thinking. I was like, I don't know why I thought this movie was going to have any sort of emotional intelligence, because the last thing James Franco's camp put out was Sausage Fest. And like, I don't know why.
No, Sausage Party.
Sausage Party.
Sausage Fest is
yeah,
what it should have been
Sausage Fest
called.
would have been the better title. I was like, I don't know why I thought this was going to have any sort of emotional intelligence. I was naive and stupid to believe that it was going, because it was kind of like, why are you having sex with their belly button? And like the whole scene where it was just kind of like James Franco like walking around with his like dick in a bag, where like I didn't think that was the joke of the movie as much as it was kind of like, there's 20 minutes of sex scenes, like that's funny, like
They do touch on that.
No,
though.
and they touch on that in the theater, but like during filming, I just thought there were so many other like telling parts of these characters that they could have drawn from.
I think by the time they got to the sex scenes, though, the rest of the crew had already realized, like, oh, this is not going to be like Citizen Kane. Like, this is just a paycheck. Let's get through it with this kind of like awful whatever.
I don't know.
I think there is emotional intelligence to this movie, though, and like I think even with like the thing you're talking about with like this sort of like homosexual like undertones going on, like I think those are there because that's how other people were perceiving this sort of like bromance that's going on.
Right.
But I don't think James Franco plays it like being a homosexual at all in this movie. I think he definitely plays it like someone who he has like an obsessive personality.
He's socially awkward. He doesn't really know how to make friends.
He needs attention. Like he's a lonely guy who like he's afraid of people talking behind his back, and he really needs like he's not upset that like Greg is dating this girl that he thinks he could get with. He's upset that Greg is paying attention to someone else who's not him. I didn't really get that in like a homosexual way, though. Like I understand that's how it comes across to other people in the movie who kind of get like that feeling about him. But
definitely.
I don't think James Franco plays it that way.
The trailer definitely tries to mislead you with like, you think he's going to be attracted to the Alison Brie character and it's a competition, when really the Alison Brie character is a fabrication. She doesn't exist in like the real world. I think they just added a girlfriend, maybe of just somebody for Tommy to be jealous of.
To me, even more than jealousy, it just seemed like
just somebody else's occupying my friend.
Yeah, it seemed like Tommy didn't want anything really good to happen for Greg unless he was in on it too, and he was part of it. That same thing with the whole, Malcolm in the Middle.
Because the most important part. The only time where they really hit something is where they're in that bar, and I don't know. I forgot what I was gonna say all of a sudden. It's just like where like
the scene in the bar
Tommy,
where like he sees her hitting on him,
and then
Tommy's like, "We have to leave now."
right, yeah. Or just there's something where he says like, "Hi, I got hired by an agency, Tommy," and Tommy's like, "Let's celebrate," and he's like, do you think they'd have room for me at your agency? And Greg sort of like avoids that subject. And I think that's like the truest, like that's what this movie should actually be chasing after, is Greg trying to be like, hey man, like, I mean, I don't know. They really spend a lot of this time being like, Tommy being like, I'm not the villain, like, just like, I don't fit into the Hollywood mold, so I should make my own thing. I don't know. I don't know. There's just, I mean, I feel like I spend a lot of reviews being like thinking that Red Letter Media has like a lot of good points, but Red Letter Media like did a review of this movie, and their first quote was, "The Disaster Artist is about an eccentric weirdo outsider that writes and directs his own film, which turns out to be one of the worst movies of all time. Kind of like Ed Wood, just without the heart, style, memorable characters, charm, or wit." Because it is. It's like Ed Wood. It's kind of like that kind of like Foster Jenkins, whatever the
Florence Foster Jenkins.
the Meryl Streep. It's kind of like these people who are not aware of their own like lack of talent, but I feel like this doesn't have the heart. There's no loving joy. Like, have you ever seen Ed Wood?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's my favorite Tim Burton
movie.
movie.
Same. But there's no loving joy in this movie. It's like there was no awe of like the Hollywood like American, like the Hollywood version of the American dream in this movie. Like there is in Ed Wood. Like there's a scene in Ed Wood where he sees Orson Welles and he talks to him, and I love this fucking scene. And like this is like right after Ed like quits like the production he's a part of that he's directing or whatever, and Orson Welles says, "Ed, visions are worth fighting for. Why spend your like entire life trying to make somebody else's dreams?" And like that's so like Ed looks up to like the heavens during that part, and I never really got like the sense of motivation like while Tommy and Greg were like making the film. It never really like builds up to anything. Like that was like an important part during Ed Wood, where like this is just kind of like Tommy and Greg have like a fight on the last day of shooting. There's never really like building up to anything. Greg storms off, and that's like a clear cut just end of the second act. The only thing that really happens in the third act of this film is kind of, "Oh, Greg, come to film premiere," and then he comes to film premiere, and then it's the film premiere, and then the movie ends. Like I was just kind of like, is this it, man? Is this like all like we came to this movie for? And it was just, again, like I said, it's just kind of like this movie's also not, this movie and the book too, to a fault, is not interested in the cult status of this movie. Like there's a bazillion movies made every year that are bad. Why does this one get like this status, kind of? I don't know. It's just like there's so many things that I felt like this movie had no heart.
I think it had heart, and I think that some of my problems with the movie have to do with it maybe inserting more heart than is warranted from the actual story. Just because like when you have the scene with like the sex scene or filming of the sex scene where he's like treating the actresses like dog
that was
shit.
one of the worst. That was the one part that really made me think of Tommy as like, this guy's a fucking monster. Like,
it was very interesting, and to Joe's credit, like that's a great point, that like there's different movies happening in the same movie, where like that's another movie is like Tommy being this manipulative kind of awful person, and then the other half is like the sort of empathetic portrayal that they have of Tommy in this movie. And like I almost wish they would have cut that scene out, as much as I enjoyed it like in a vacuum, the filming of that sex scene, because there's a lot of tension in that. There's a lot of like good like meta stuff about filmmaking going on in that scene. But to insert that in this movie is to kind of taint the empathetic portrayal of Tommy that they're creating in this movie that works really well without that scene. Like if you take that scene out, then like the ending is like untainted and kind of like perfect for me. Like just it really encapsulates like the cult status of the room. Like it whether it's accurate or not, it captures what the room kind of means to Hollywood and to popular culture, just as being this movie that is we thoroughly enjoy because of how bad it is.
Yeah.
But the whole point is it's not that it's bad, it's just that we enjoy it, and that there is joy that's being brought to people through his movie. And I really liked...
Yeah, go on.
I just really liked that ending, that the kind of realization that Tommy comes to in the end about, you know, you may not have created a good movie, and they may not be perceiving it the way that you wanted, but you've achieved fame like you wanted, and you've brought joy to people like you've wanted through your movies. But that's a harder point to kind of come to terms with when you have a scene in this movie about Tom being like a real jackass in this movie, and like misogynistic, and maybe even worse. And it's a weird time for that kind of scene to be in a movie when the whole like Me Too movement is going on. Like, I almost wish they would have just cut that out and been like, let's have this fantasy world where Tommy wasn't a jackass.
Did that
it's
actually
a fun
happen?
movie up until that point. Yeah.
Did that actually happen? Was he like that during the sex scene? Did he say like, "Oh, your body's disgusting"?
he was like that, except the entire time Greg knew him. You know, he was just nonstop manipulative and crazy and wild and just a bad person, kind of.
What I was going to say before was this. This really felt like Greg's movie more than a movie about Tommy. It felt more like Greg's story, which I guess, based on Greg's book.
Yeah, I think it's Greg's plot, but Tommy is or rather James Franco is, he carries the movie. It doesn't work without James Franco giving that performance. If there was just some random no-name actor in that role, the movie doesn't really work.
Yeah. I wish this movie was more of a heightened reality, kind of. Like when so the opening scene, not the scene of the fucking stupid people talking about what they think of the room.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about that. I hated that.
I hate that. If I had to cut this movie, that'd be the first thing I'd be like, let's get rid of this. None of them actually come out and say especially Adam Scott, who's like, this is the best movie ever made, and if I could go back in time, I would be in this movie. And be like, Adam Scott, you're missing the whole point of this fucking film. Nobody wants to be a part of this film. Only the poor fucking.
I feel like they thought they had to set the stage. Yeah. You don't need to see the room to understand this movie. We all did, but the movie does great job with the exposition for everything. We start off before the room is being made in this movie, so it doesn't matter that you've seen the room, and it's almost better if you haven't seen the room, because then the portrayals of the scenes don't seem like they don't add up. Good actors playing bad actors in this movie can't be as bad as the actual bad actors in the room are.
But also,
you can't portray how bad they actually are in the room, no matter how good of an actor you're. Even James Franco, as great as his performance is as playing Tommy, sort of outside of the creation of the room, he can't nail Tommy, how bad Tommy Wiseau is in the room. Nobody can. You can't nail how awkward Denny is in the room, or the guy with the frosted tips who does the weird lips licking thing. There's so many even Dave Franco, again, I think he's pretty great in this movie, but you can't nail how bad Greg Sestero is in the room.
Yeah. The guy with the gun nailed it, I must say.
Oh, dude,
Zac
that was
Efron.
perfect. That was the only time that I laughed during this film. That's what I'm talking about. Is he played a heightened version of kind of fuck. Shit! He was just yelling curse. That actually happened on set, but I think there's a way to play into the actual history and make it heightened and to actually be this is humorous. Laugh at this scene. And Zac Efron is in the fucking renaissance of his career, I think. He's doing a lot of really great comedic performances. Even though he's not great in Neighbors 2, he kind of is, but in this film, he comes in, he says 2 or 3 lines as Chris R, which is just funny in itself, and he gives a really great heightened performance.
Who was Zac Efron here? Because I read after seeing the movie that
Zac Efron's the guy who comes in with the gun
with
and
the beanie, who holds Denny up.
Fuck you!
That was him.
Yeah.
I was wondering because I saw Zac Efron. I'm where the fuck was he in the movie?
He arguably has one of the funniest parts of this movie.
That's great. That makes me appreciate it so much more.
Oh no, definitely.
There's a lot of there's shit that must have gotten cut out of this movie, because if you look at the credits, Christopher Mintz-Plasse is in the credits. There's a bunch of other people like Jason Mitchell. He doesn't show up in this movie at all. And he's not even one of the people that's credited as themselves. They were actual roles in this movie that clearly got cut out at some point.
But
also, the version that played at South by Southwest is not the movie version we saw.
Oh no, definitely. It was very different. Yeah, it was very
version.
Long. It was.
I'm curious to see if that's a better version than what we saw. Because people in my theater liked it, but no one stood up and applauded.
Right, but I'm talking about let's talk about the sort of Zac Efron performance. It was a heightened performance, I think. I don't think the opening scene of Tommy Wiseau or James Franco was that funny. I think they had all these wide shots of him doing the sort of Tennessee Williams Streetcar Named Desire kind of, Stella or whatever. They kind of get these wide shots of him like, oh my god, he's climbing up the side of the stage. And then they just cut where he's like back standing on the ground. Like if they did something ridiculous where it's just a bunch of just like, they already have this kind of weird sort of documentary style cinematography. If they cut it something more like The Office, like I was watching like earlier, like on Facebook, it was like The Office, like when they did like, oh, like parkour, like that cold opening, where it's just kind of like cut. Like they did funny parts, like where it was just kind of like, they were just trying to document James Franco playing, Tommy Wiseau playing, and they were just trying to get all these wide shots of people like, can you imagine like if you were in this crowded space like acting class and this guy was doing this? And maybe that's funny to like an actor in Hollywood who's like, can you imagine if you went to like Groundlings and did this in front of like an acclaimed teacher or something, and you acted like this much of an asshole, and it's like, imagine how the class would react. Instead, like, what if we cut like where he's just fucking like completely ridiculous, which he was, and it was just better cut, and it was just better shot. It was just like heightened. It was like, it would be like Zac Efron like being like, fuck, all right, let's fucking shoot this, kind of like, like what if that was like, because Tommy, that's not like a far jump for Tommy to be in a heightened reality. He's living in a heightened reality. Mm-hmm. This film's trying to zoom out and do this pseudo documentary of like what it was like for the people to be around him. I don't know. I'm trying to.
Here's my take: is that I think that the whole movie is pretty much Greg's point of view, and in that first scene, he hasn't gotten close to Tommy yet. So the first scene is kind of showing us what he's seeing of Tommy from afar. Okay, he's in the back of the room after doing his scene, and he's watching Tommy do this thing on screen.
I love that. That was my favorite scene.
Yeah,
one of my favorite scenes.
I don't think the first scene's supposed to be funny. I didn't laugh at all at the first scene. I just think it's a great setup in terms of who are these characters. Like we get to see both of them, trying to be actors. They're in acting classes. They're going to do these extracurricular things. But then how do they each take it? Greg's showing up. He's doing the work, but he can't step outside of himself. Tommy is showing up sort of half-heartedly, but is completely able to just be like, yeah, like, I'll do it. Okay, I'll do it. I don't care. And do this, like, not amazing, but amazing to Greg to some degree, like, Stella scene. I don't know. I really like the opening sequence for this movie a lot.
I just think, I don't know, with what the rest of this film is, I think that they could have accomplished that and got laughs. If this was a different movie where Tommy was a dickhead the entire time, I think watching like a kind of sad scene of him doing that, but instead it was just middle of the road. Like the entirety of this movie.
I don't think it was a very funny movie, but I also didn't come into it expecting.
It wasn't. I didn't think it was really like a comedy. It had funny parts.
It was, yeah. It wasn't a comedy, but then it didn't have heart, and then it also wasn't dramatic. So like,
I think it had heart.
Okay.
I do think there's something to be said about the friendship or pseudo friendship that exists between Greg and Tommy, because there's a bonding that sort of happens between them. They kind of come out of the honeymoon phase, and Greg's realizing like, oh, like living with Tommy is more than I bargained for. He's actually more of a fucking weirdo than I thought. Then we kind of have the breakup of them on set, and then we do get kind of the reunion in the end, where like, even at the premiere, Greg is kind of like, or when they're like pulling up, and he's like, why are we like driving past the premiere? Let's just go back. But then he does kind of come around to Tommy just through his appreciation of the film and trying to console Tommy. And then they do, or at least according to this film, become friends again in the end. I don't know how accurate that is.
They've had a bunch of falling outs, I think.
I mean, I can imagine that it's a tumultuous relationship to be friends with Tommy Wiseau.
I am with Mike. I feel like it had heart too. I mean,
it wasn't
a perfect movie, but
I was touched by the ending, and I just wished that they had less of the stuff that was kind of detrimental to Tommy's character, or gone full tilt on that stuff and have it more of like a tragedy of like, oh, it was hard to be in this movie, rather than I was like blessed to have known Tommy Wiseau, which is kind of the message it comes across in the end of like my time with the funny Tommy Wiseau, you know?
Right.
And I don't know. I kind of like that overall message of like,
yeah,
you can create something and you can have this idea for what something's supposed to be, and the way that the audience is going to take that is something completely different, and you kind of have to roll with that and adapt to it. And we kind of do get this kind of realization of, you know, there's these things that Tommy wanted. He wanted to be famous. He wanted to be, you know, the hero, not the villain. And he wanted to be, you know, a movie star. And he got all of those, just wasn't in the way that he perceived or dreamed of having those, you know. He thought he was going to be the James Dean and this incredible movie star, but he's famous more of like an infamous way. And he's a hero because he's this cult hero status. And, you know, he's a movie star because he's a pretty recognizable face in film because of this sort of cult B movie that he ended up making. I don't know. I really liked that turn in the end.
There was a scene after the credits, right?
Yeah, I didn't stay for that, but I
didn't
read
stay
about
for
that.
it either. I would have had I known it was in there.
Was it the side by side?
They had that, and then
Okay,
after the credits,
okay.
supposedly there was Tommy Wiseau making a cameo where James Franco as Tommy runs into a character named, this is according to Wikipedia, I haven't seen the post-credit scene, but a character named Henry or something like that. And Henry asks if he can be in a movie or something, and James Franco as Tommy Wiseau says no or something like that. It didn't sound great from the description.
Apparently Tommy contractually had to appear in this movie.
Oh, really?
Is what I heard.
I think they wanted to fit Greg in too, and either the scene got cut at some stage in writing or production, or
Yeah, I saw that he was like a casting agent on IMDb, but I feel like
again, there's a lot of people that are listed on IMDb and Wikipedia that don't actually show up in the movie.
Tommy Wiseau in real life seems to be pretty cool with this movie, which is odd considering what a dick he comes off in.
Yeah,
That's what it's what he makes his money off of. Is just doing these screenings everywhere. I'm sure he gets an appearance fee.
There's a big
and the money for them to rent it from, you know, his production company.
Right, because there's very famously Tommy Wiseau. People are like, "Did you read The Disaster Artist, the book?" And Tommy Wiseau would be like, "Yes, Greg is liar. Only about 45% of book is true, kind of." And then when he saw the book, James Franco, I've seen him say this like fucking 10 or 12 times. He's like, he'll do like an impression of Tommy where he'll be like, yeah, he's like, James, like only 99.9% of movie is true, kind of, you know, like he's like, lighting was off in beginning of movie. And James is like, he's wearing fucking sunglasses while he watches the movie. But again, I saw some sort of review at some point where it was just kind of like James Franco is more interested in laughing at the clown than looking at what makes the clown funny, kind of. And it's like I kind of have to agree with some of that because like it's okay to laugh at the clown if we make a buddy comedy like movie, but again, because he can be so hurtful and so sort of you know, disrespectful to women, it's just kind of like, where does this guy fucking come from, kind of, you know?
See, I didn't really view this as a comedy, and I felt more heart and touching notes to James Franco's performance than like comedy. You know, like I think some of my favorite, like the.
But
scene
did you not laugh at like what Tommy was though? Like
but I don't think
that performance not funny of James Franco?
But I
like
think
kind of intimidating, like a guy who
It was.
There's
Dude,
definitely
you're
there's
laughing
something
at him, you know,
humorous
like,
about it, but I do think that James Franco sort of captured a little bit of like the hubris of Tommy, and I think he definitely struck at the heart of what we all sort of are able, or what we could. the best we could try to understand about what makes Tommy Tommy. You know, this need to be seen, and this need to get approval from everyone, but also this inability to see disapproval unless it's like right in front of his face. You know,
I saw that
he doesn't have the self-awareness to know that like it's weird to go up to Judd Apatow and a restaurant and perform scenes from like Shakespeare or like whatever, you know, like he doesn't know the things that we kind of know just instinctually from. There's something that's clearly off with Tommy, and I think that James Franco nails that to an empathetic degree.
The empathy I saw mostly from him was in that final scene when he was like really nervous in the movie theater. That's when I really felt like
I really liked the gradual like realization of like when Greg brings him back in and he's like, you can like literally see it in his face as he's upset. He's like leaning against the wall, and then he's realizing like, oh, like I've brought all these people joy. He like
that was
he
sweet.
turns right around, and again, it is a good point that it's compressing like 10 years into one scene. But if the movie stands alone, that is a good scene on its own. You know, of him like, oh, like this is everything that I wanted, is to be famous, to be liked, to have movies that I've created that people are enjoying. And he, you know, I don't know how they could have told the movie while
it was
being true to the fact that it took 10 years for him
the
to
perfect way
realize
to end it.
Yeah.
We didn't need those side-by-side comparisons in the credits. I don't know.
They hurt.
We didn't
it,
need that at all. It was
it's
weird
not
as
as
hell
close
to
as they
watch.
thought it was.
No.
Also, the scene with Chris R, or whatever the guy Zac Efron's character is. This is another thing that hurt. Again, maybe it's something that maybe they were being true to the production of the movie, and something got changed in a reshoot later of the creation of the room. But they shoot it in the alleyway, but that scene takes place on the roof. I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah,
like,
no.
Because I watched the room right before,
No,
and I was like,
that's
I remember that scene because I remember the bad green screen.
No, yeah, they reshoot that. Like that's a part of the book or whatever.
Okay, all right. So they were.
It's like an intimidating kind of like Chris, the actual actor that plays Chris R, intimidates like Tommy to be like, you better pay me for the second fucking take of this or whatever. And again, Tommy's like crazy and but yeah, no, I definitely agree. I don't give a fuck about like how accurately or specifically, you know, you recreate scenes from The Room. You know, like it just like to play that, like there's no heart in that for me. You know, like I was just.
Although I just wish they would have played some of the scenes a little, like, because I expected the recreations of these scenes to be worse than the actual room, and it's weirder that they were better. You know, like because you can it's a movie, so we can make things more dramatic or over the top or emphasize things. So I would expect a movie about the making of a bad movie to have the recreations of the bad movie scenes be worse than they are in the bad movie,
also,
to really get it across.
This is off topic, but was that shit true about him not giving the cast and crew water?
Yeah. And I mean, like, Greg Sestero like drove that woman who passed out to like the emergency room, and he does a lot of terrible shit to this cast, and just bizarre shit. It's kind of like, again, I really like that they have that. I wish I didn't read this book before I saw this movie, because it ruins a lot of it. I'm just like, oh man, I could write like 5 better screenplays than this. But I really do like that they include that sort of Sandy scene of like where the bank teller kind of brags about how he's like, yeah, man, like completely has no disregard for his job, and kind of like brags like, yeah, man, this like bank account's like a fucking bottomless pit. Like that's like a really good like. And it's like I think Sandy like actually makes like some sort of joke to the bank teller, like about like wooden nickel or something. He's like, I doubt this will clear or whatever. And it's a really I really like that scene. I don't know. It's just it's a complicated, long fucking story. I really like the structure of the book, I didn't want to talk this much about the book, but I really like the structure of the book, because it starts when, like, this is when I met Tommy, chapter 1, and then it'll kind of go non-linear of it'll actually be, we're starting the room. This is how weird and embarrassing and fucking weird it is, for you buying the book who likes the room. And then chapter 2, this is when I'm starting to meet Tommy, and then it trades back and forth between these two things. And it actually works really well. And I kind of wish the film did something more like that, because then we could kind of like go back and forth and make these comparisons of like, why is he doing this in the room? And it's like when they meet, and like, maybe they don't have time for that shit. But in one of those two like non-linear stories, Greg finds like this kind of like written note that I don't know why they're doing like this press tour on just kind of nobody knows Tommy's age, nobody knows where Tommy's from. Tommy writes like this big long thing that Greg stumbles across. And he's from like somewhere in like Poland or something, I don't know, during some sort of war. And he sneaks into where is it that he sneaks into? Into like somewhere in France, and he works illegally there with his cousin as a dishwasher, and he's at this hostel, and he works this fucking job, but it's fucking glorious compared to this like war-ridden like European country that he's coming from. And then one night, his like hostel that he's staying in, which is already shit, a bunch of French police come in, and they fucking beat the shit out of him. They fucking like knock some of his teeth out, and they fucking are like, we'll fucking kill you right now. And they put like a gun to his head, and they like shove it down his throat and everything. And they're like, and they fucking torture him. They throw him out into the street, and they're like, you don't talk about this or we'll fucking kill you, kind of thing. And so Tommy's out on the street. He's not allowed back in his hostel. He goes back out into like the world of France, where he like meets like an older man. An older man sodomizes him for months, basically, as rent, kind of. And he's raped by another like man while he's in a holding cell, kind of. And then he comes to America, and he works himself up, and he kind of talks about how he makes like the fortune that he has. Like he's kind of just like this guy who's like selling like these fucking like these like mechanical birds that are like popular in France, and he'll throw them like kind of on like the boardwalk of California, and people like love him, and they buy all these birds. And then he eventually like buys like all this different property, and he's renting it out for like $8,000 a month, kind of. And he has this kind of like fashion, or just this like, he's selling like off-brand Levi jeans, kind of. And there's even a point where he is married, and he gets into this very emotional divorce where his wife is not so, faithful to him and everything. And he's really fucking done on his luck, and he gives up on this, like, he wants to be an actor so bad. He gives up on it. He becomes like this businessman kind of for 10 years. And then he goes like back into acting. And then he writes in his journal, he says, somebody asked me to be their scene partner tonight. And it's Greg. And it's just kind of like, fuck, man, that's why he's such like this weird fucking dick who's not trusting of anybody. And it's like, the book is so emotional. Like, it's just like, oh, fuck, man, like, I thought he was this dickhead this entire time. And he is.
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
That explains an awful lot.
Tommy's been through the fucking ringer of fucking war and rape.
I wish you hadn't told me that, because that's the movie.
And just, no, exactly. This movie is such a goofy fucking, like, James Franco's like, hey, Seth Rogen, what if we make, like, a movie about this dickhead who thinks he's a movie guy? Like, like, that's what I saw. I wish I didn't read the book before I saw this movie. You know,
I mean, I
it's
understand
just,
because The Room is such a part of like Hollywood, like lore, like everyone who like is talking about this movie of a certain age can remember seeing like the billboards in Hollywood, like that's what all they talk about. So I understand why these people, because they're of that age, to have seen that would make the movie about the making of The Room and not about just Tommy Wiseau and what a strange character he is in general. Maybe there'll be a movie at some point about, because that sounds way more interesting than this.
It is.
As much as I did like this movie a whole lot. Like that's crazy interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, you guys ready to get into some finger ratings?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let me just read this real quick. On review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 93% based on 225 reviews and an average rating of 7.7 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, "Oh, hi, Mark. The Disaster Artist is a surprisingly poignant and charming movie about a movie that explores the creative process with unexpected delicacy." I can go first if you want, since you talked for a while.
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, did I like really go off on a fucking tear?
No, I mean, I had
you explained a lot.
Okay, yeah.
I was glad to hear that. I think the film was a little overhyped for me, just in terms of like the festival response and the Oscar award season buzz that's going on.
P.S. What I said again, I can't express enough that films should stand on their own. And like we shouldn't take anything into account,
I'm glad I didn't read the book now.
Yeah,
I'm going to.
But no, it's yeah. I mean, I just think films should stand on their own and don't take that into account, or just yeah.
For this though, I did enjoy it a lot though. I think the ending is really redeeming of the whole movie. Not that the rest of the movie wasn't enjoyable, but the ending was just a very positive experience for me. I think it's cute in a way. It's touching. I felt moved by it, and I think it makes the whole movie this kind of nice sort of like meta homage to a little interesting part of like Hollywood history, and I think it's really carried by James Franco's performance. I think he's funny when he needs to be. He's like heart-wrenching when he maybe even doesn't need to be, but he is in those scenes, and just finds ways to just insert a lot of empathy into what we probably didn't perceive as being an empathetic character, and probably isn't an empathetic character.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't take away from this performance though. And I think his directing has finally paid off in this movie, and I just hope that he learns now to like settle into doing comedy with his friends, like just writing and doing what he knows rather than trying to make like these American epic novels from some of our like great American authors. Like only like the Coen brothers have been able to master putting Cormac McCarthy on the screen. So maybe don't try to do it for your like your master's thesis, James Franco. And God, I really hope he doesn't try to make Child of God, because it's a tough book to even read. I can't imagine seeing that movie on like screen. He made Child of God, but like I don't know.
I was about to say, yeah, it's out there, Mike. I'm sorry. He already made it.
They were talking about making it like a major motion picture, not just his like thesis. Yeah. And I really hope he doesn't make Blood Meridian, because he was trying to make that for a while. What?
Oh no, nothing. I
thought you were going to tell me that it's being made.
No.
Because it's been on and off for a while.
No, I've recently read it, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't want it to be a movie. It can't be a movie. There's no way to make that into a movie. It's not meant to be a movie.
Right.
And I think my main complaint is that we didn't really get into this. I think the soundtrack hurts this movie a lot. It grounds the movie in the time period.
Yeah.
But I think there's other ways they could have gone about that besides the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Like I think the soundtrack in the trailer would have been a better choice, even if it's not time period accurate. Like what this movie's like late 90s, early 2000s. But the soundtrack has like a great like electronic like 80s vibe going to it, and that would have worked way better. Just because I mean it's LA, like there's palm trees in the background, like shit like that works with like the 80s vibe. The trailer had a very great vibe to it, and it got you in the mood, whereas the soundtrack in this movie kind of pulled me out of it, where it was just like, here's this song that you remember from 2001, here's this song from 2002, and it wasn't like we don't that time is not far enough away that we need to be grounded in that,
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to put like 60s music in a 60s movie, but I don't need to hear like those songs from the 2000s to like remember what that time was like.
But I also loved the score during that first like teaser trailer of like, I did not hit her, I did not, like, it's kind of this like almost like tuk, tuk, tuk. Like it's just like this very percussive kind of soundtrack, like original soundtrack.
I can't remember
Okay,
it during
yeah.
that.
I kind of liked that.
I just remember the big trailer that hit with like that, like, I can't remember what song it is. I just remember like a synth in the background. It was kind of like a Vice City, like kind of 80. It's more of a Miami type song, but it works.
And then
for
they're actually in a club and they play like a weird like 90s kind of, yeah, it's just a lot of
What's the
weird,
song that he dances to in the club that he's...
I don't know. I can't.
It is a
remember.
funny
Yeah.
scene, but I wanted like just give me some music to like really vibe to in that scene. But yeah, and then like I brought up before, I think the moral conflict of like him really being an asshole in that one scene, but then sort of having like a moral like redemption arc later on in the movie. Those are kind of at odds with each other, and I wish they would have just picked one and like maybe made him been more empathetic the whole way through, or have him apologize at some point so that we can be like completely just at peace with him being an empathetic character in the end. But I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5. I had a pretty positive experience with this movie. I'm pretty pleasantly surprised with James Franco directing this movie. And I mean, I always knew he was a good actor in the right role. And I was definitely very pleased with his performance in this. So 3.5 out of 5.
All right, type. Alex?
I think 3.5 out of 5 sounds about right. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't great, but it was really good. I don't know if I have too much more to say about it. I mean, it was pretty much what I expected. I thought it was funny at times. I thought it was really funny. I thought it had heart. As far as like storytelling, it could have been a little better, but you're always going to run into issues like that when you're dealing with a true story.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was good, especially to see, Franco and Seth Rogen in this too, because Sausage Party was not good.
Did you go through the sauce? Did you see sauce?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was even good compared to The Interview, which I thought was god awful.
Interview was terrible. Yeah.
Turn the interview off.
This is definitely redemption for them.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
All right. 3.5. Okay. Yeah, I'm not far off. I think I'm going to give it 3 fingers. Again, I kind of think this is... I talked a lot during this episode. I think it's a little bit of a puff piece on Tommy Wiseau. And, I mean, he has to sign off on this film to some extent. And I get that, Or maybe... it's kind of like one of my favorite movies of all time is The Social Network, and it's like he didn't really have to sign off on that movie, Mark Zuckerberg, and that's like a whole psychological thing, and a lot of that isn't true, but it's one of the most phenomenal movies I think in existence. I don't know. I think this movie wanted to, again, because maybe the Social Network isn't completely true. Like, Mark Zuckerberg's like, I didn't have a girlfriend, like at the beginning of the film that I broke up with. Like, and again, like, who cares, man? Like, it's this kind of like, I think this movie wanted to rely too much on, like, like, nothing's more weirder than the truth, man. Like, I feel like that was Franco's kind of motive, like, for this film. Or like, can you believe this actually happened? Like, yeah, a lot of this film is like fucking crazy that like shit like this happened, but like with I don't know. I just think maybe there could have been a better director for this film, and I think James Franco could have more concentrated on his role, and I think there could have been a better direction for this film. And this really could have been like an Oscar-worthy film. Like, somebody could have put this into like Best Picture. Because again, the Oscars love a good fucking Hollywood story. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say. I don't know. I wish there was a little more going on in the minds of the other actors during the movie. We get like the one scene of how everybody else is thinking when they're all eating at like the craft service table. Like that's all we see into like what the actors think of this scene. Besides that, we just kind of see like what Sandy's thinking. And yeah, during this craft service table, I really like it because it's kind of like they all kind of get to have like a shot at like what they think Tommy Wiseau is all about or what the script's all about. Because I mean that is like a big thing is nobody showed like he didn't show anybody the script, like, you know, in the experience in the book, in this movie nobody sees this script, and I feel like nobody really tries to piece it together besides like this one scene where they're just eating craft service, you know. And maybe that could have been for a longer movie, you know. It's a comedy movie, it was an hour and a half long. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Dave Franco was a great Craig Sestero. Not that he has to. He didn't have the look, or I don't.
He clearly wasn't trying to.
Yeah.
Play like an impression of Greg. He was just playing what the script was, you know.
He doesn't really act like Greg. He like in somebody else said this. This isn't an original thought, but in that first teaser trailer that we saw where Tommy's trying to be like, I did not hit her, it's not true, like that entire time Greg has this kind of like perplexed or concerned like look on his face, and that's kind of like most of the movie where he's just kind of like he's like that the entire time they're filming The Room, kind of. It's just kind of, there's no other emotion. He's never embarrassed during The Room, which I was kind of bothered by. Like, he's embarrassed when they're trying to, you know, like, propose their lines out loud in the restaurant, but he's never, like, embarrassed in front of these other people in the cast during The Room so much, really.
I think he is.
Yeah.
Like, I think the one scene where, like, Tommy has to keep repeating the same line over and over again because he can't get it right and keeps asking for the line. He's definitely a little embarrassed. And he stands up for Tommy and, like, tries to help him out.
During the I did not hit her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, the entire time I saw, like, a kind of very... Because at the end of that, and this is, like kind of an interview with, like, this is the only quote that I've heard by, like, Tommy Wiseau. He's like, I really like the scene where after he get the line, Greg hug him. Like, it's kind of like, because, like, in that scene, Greg is totally unashamed of this character, and he gets this really simpleton line correct, and in front of the whole cast, he goes to hug Tommy, and he goes like,
I think it's that, like, that Greg has lived with Tommy for so long that he understands, like, this is what Tommy needs to, like, go forward and just to get this movie fucking done.
But that's not like an embarrassed thing, though, you know. Like,
but he does have scenes where I think he's playing, like, he doesn't want to embarrass Tommy, but he is embarrassed because he does it in his Dave Franco way of, like, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, you know, like, he really does that kind of, like, unsure way of talking where, like, he's not trying to let on too fully that, like, yeah, you should know these fucking lines, Tommy. But he is like, yeah, like, maybe what if we do this? Like,
he's very apologetic and very nurturing, Greg, you know, like,
he enables him for sure. Which is why I think it's a decent Dave Franco performance.
Yeah. But yeah, and then again, I really do like my last thing. Is that as much as I enjoy James Franco's portrayals of these sort of modern day, like, cult celebrities like Tommy Wiseau or Riff Raff, again, like I said near the beginning of this review, I can never really tell whether he's acting or he's doing some sort of an impression. Again, I didn't really like that side by side of the Room and the Disaster Artist comparison at the end, because it makes me feel like he's doing some sort of an impression. He's like, look how close we were with like these accuracies, you know. But James Franco's Tommy is more of this sort of like squinty, tired, sedated Tommy. Like he's always like, yeah, like you know, like whereas like Tommy, again in interviews and again when like Greg is like imitating him in the book, he's always kind of like or like, don't be jealous, Greg. Like he's like more lively kind of. He's like, Greg, I got a casting agent, but don't be jealous, Greg. Like, you know, like he's like very much, he likes to go like up in octaves, whereas like James Franco is like, Greg, like, you know, like, Greg, don't be jealous. I don't know. It's just, it's very different.
He does do like the tranquilized, like, I'll do it. I don't care.
Yeah. Where like, Tommy in real life is just kind of like, especially you can hear him through the ADR with the Room, which is, the Room is
oh god, I'm so glad you brought that up. Why did that not come up in this movie? That like 90% of this movie is ADR.
Like none of it is actually Tommy's voice.
I completely forgot about how much that bothered me watching The Disaster Artist.
Because that's
it's not going to change my rating, but like that's such a big part of The Room. That was the major thing that stuck out with me. The Room is every single fucking line is ADR, and they're saying things that don't line up with the way it seems like they dubbed it from a foreign language. Is how much ADR is in this movie.
And I feel like that's what makes like so horrible. Like that's what makes like those side by side comparisons of The Room and The Disaster Artist at the end. You're kind of like, something's not matching
some of them they nailed, like the high doggy scene. They really, because that's one where it really sticks out. But then like the scene where like when Denny comes in, it's like, oh, I just like to watch you guys, like, which like my favorite scene in the room.
Oh, definitely the same, yeah. And I
but
love
you can literally
the
hear like it's the ADR. Even if they did ADR in The Disaster Artist, it's too good compared to the ADR that's actually done in The Room.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean about like they should have made it worse. Like it should have been worse than The Room actually is. How noticeable the ADR is. It should have been watching like Kung Pao Enter the Fist. Yeah. Their like interpretations of it. If you're gonna tell a comedy movie about there being a bad movie, like it needs to be worse than the movie actually is.
That is because that's like the fucking like first movie that I really like lost my shit, like crying, peed my pants at. And I feel like most of like the generation that like loved The Room I was watching like fucking Kung Pao Enter the Fist. And it was kind of like, here you go, baby. Like kind of just like, or just like him, like, you know, it was just this weird Americanized version of just like just such improper ADR, just like ADR that doesn't match up, even though Tommy has fucking buried millions of dollars into post-production. And again, I'm really sad that post-production wasn't a big part of the book or the movie. And I don't know. Yeah, they should have, because James Franco's saying it in real time, but Tommy's just kind of like, have a good day.
His like, physical performance is nothing, but then he gives a lot in the ADR performance.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so goofy. It's like they don't understand, like what. Yeah, it's like they don't understand what makes The Room funny. I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway, so you give it a 3, so that's going to come out to 3.3 repeating. So that'll round down to 3 fingers. So. Joe's rating reigns supreme.
It's still a positive.
It's a good movie.
I would still tell people,
and I would
to
recommend people see it. Like I can't imagine anyone having a negative experience watching
whether
this
you've
movie.
seen The Room or not.
I think that's why it's been so well received. Is that it's fun. Like if you can completely let go of the baggage of it being not totally truthful to the book, and just kind of ignore that one weird scene in the middle with the sex like filming scene, which I did like, but again, like we've brought up, it's sort of out of place in this movie, and it reminds you of a movie that could have been made maybe out of this.
And it's also going to introduce people to alt comedy.
Yeah.
Kind of. It's going to be like, all right, well, now I have to see The Room. And they're going to fall down this kind of rabbit hole of kind of like, all right, there's The Room. What else is there? You know? I don't know.
Anyway, if you agree or disagree, leave a comment below on SoundCloud, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching or listening to this review. We'd love to continue the conversation. As we always say, this was also a long review, so we're going to get out of this real quick. Alex, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'll hopefully see you again next year.
Yeah,
Next year for
always a pleasure. Yeah.
another Oscar contender next year. Or Daddy's Home 3. We'll stick you on a
Yes.
bad one for once.
Welcome aboard.
You gotta pay your How Many Fingers dues.
Yeah.
Signing out for How Many Fingers, a podcast. I'm Mike.
I'm Joe.
I am Alex.
And we'll see you next week.